This conversation is about how our homes may be causing us to be sick. We talk about the nuances of what makes a home safe or unsafe, what we can do about it, what are some of the DIY stuff or next steps we can do if we know that we are physically ill with mold illness or CIRS, and then what can we do about the home, and what are practical steps that we can do instead of just getting overwhelmed and throwing out everything and just not knowing what to do next. I now eat a lot of meat, and so do they. If you want to thrive, you need to eat meat. Meat is required. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho, and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private functional medicine practice where we focus on root cause healing, and that often starts with the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet. Today, the pleasure of sitting down with Joshua Rachal. He is the founder of Texas Home Inspectors, and he is, I would say, a inspector or a forensic scientist of homes and sick buildings. Joshua is often called when a remediation goes bad or a home inspection goes bad, or if a person starts feeling unwell in a home and they know that something about the home is not good. Josh and his team goes into homes to make sure what is going on, where often a water source or water damage is, and how to stop that internal bleeding of the home. It is not easy work, nor is it work that many of us want to believe is part of our illness. But a lot of times, why we are sick is because of the homes or buildings we live and work in. And if we can find the source, or even ways to maintain it until we can really get to that root cause of the home building or the building itself, then we can start actually healing ourselves. And then once we heal ourselves, we can find a way to really take care of the building or the home. I know these conversations aren't always the easiest, especially when it costs a lot of money to remediate. But in this conversation, we talk about smaller things we can do initially to see if we can maybe stay in the home or even maybe get in a tent for a bit just to start healing. My goal with you will always be root cause healing. And if we can get answers, albeit sometimes not the easiest ones, I will always be advocating for that. I hope that this conversation gives you a little bit more insight into the homes, what's going on, and what you can look for if you know that somebody in your home is suffering from mold illness or CIRS. There are some things that you can do first before you start having to go to an external IEP or home environmentalist. Let's get right into this interview. Hi, Josh. I am super excited to have you on my channel. I've heard so many good things, the incredible work you're doing, the work that you did with Dr. Peter. And so I would love to introduce you to the people that may not have heard of you on my channel. If you can introduce yourself to the people listening and watching.
Sure, thank you. And it's also an honor to do this with you. My name is Joshua Rachal. I'm a mold assessment consultant in Texas. I'm also what's called a mold assessor in Florida. So I'm licensed in both of those states. My wife and I have been in this industry approximately 9 years now, and understanding the ins and outs and the corruption in this industry keeps you on your toes at all times. It really does.
Yeah, and I was speaking with Emily about your cases and stories that you've been working on military homes. There's been a lot of legal cases about the care of landlords and not caring actually about the mold, and I've even seen pictures from some of our community members where they will share images of black mold just growing on the walls and nothing is being done. Can you share some of the corruption or even some of the cases that you have represented in court with these military homes?
Sure, and obviously without being specific,
Sure.
certain families. But okay, so right now, I mean, I've been on multiple bases out of Georgia, also in Texas, in Florida. In fact, in 2 days, I'm flying out to that would be Tampa, Florida, for I believe an Air Force base over there, and then for another approximately 10 days, I'll be in Key West on a couple military bases there, just building cases. I'm being retained by a law firm. So the overwhelming majority of these military homes and these cases that I'm building, it comes down to negligent practices as it relates to, let's say, a water intrusion event. Let's say a slow leak under a sink. Maybe let's say, the homeowners or the occupants, they don't see that slow leak. So you're going to have severe water damage, and a lot of times, mold forms. Now, finally, let's say those occupants catch it and they report it to the property management company responsible for these military homes. It's actually a privatized company. And so once they put in that work order, let's say this maintenance guy will show up and they'll stop the water leak, but they do nothing with the water damage. They just leave it there, or they'll paint over it, they'll conceal it. And that's what I'm running into with the overwhelming majority of these military homes. It just comes down to improper handling of liquid water inside of a home that leads to mold, and they're gaslighting. They're gaslighting all of these military families that are starting brand new families with tiny children, multiple children. Let's say the husband or the wife is abroad and one is staying home taking care of the family. They're having to, in some cases, they're claiming they're fighting for their lives because they're fighting for their health. While, let's say, the spouse is abroad fighting for our freedoms, let's say. So a lot of these situations with these military families, it's heartbreaking, especially because they're being gaslit. They're telling, let's say, these privatized military housing companies that take care of the maintenance, they're telling them that mold is dust when it's clearly mold. Um, or they're telling them, hey, it's a specific type of mold that will not harm you, but yet they didn't sample the mold. In fact, I would say an overwhelming majority of the cases where these families are reporting mold-related issues to the property management company, they do not go in and sample it. I believe that is their policy, that they don't need to go in and take samples. They send, let's say, an indoor environmental professional, or sometimes they refer to them as environmentalists. But in Florida, you have to be licensed to do it. So, but mind you, still, this property management company, they're sending in unlicensed individuals in many situations, not all, but many. It's heartbreaking once you start reading about these military families and the trials that they're having to endure. Again, while let's say the spouse is abroad fighting for our freedoms, it's a very bad situation they're all in.
In terms of the rights of the, so if I were to see mold in my home or the water damage and I called the landlord and they brought in someone, do I have the right to say I'd like specific tests done or the test run on the water damage? Do I have any rights as a tenant in that home?
So I'm going to tread lightly on this because I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
But in Texas, I do know this, that a landlord has a duty to provide safe and healthy housing. And so it's a very quick search where you can pull up tenant rights. And so while I'm not sure if it is a right of a tenant to demand that, let's say, a landlord hires certain qualified individual to, take all these different tests, demanding, let's say, the landlord to spend their money, I do believe it is a right of that tenant to hire their own inspector and be the advocate for that individual that homed them, meaning the tenant, because I mean, we're about to go down a rabbit hole here of, well, who do landlords typically hire? They're going to hire someone that is going to fulfill a narrative of, hey, there is no mold. And they're going to side a lot of times these inspectors that sell themselves. I'll say it like that. I call them corrupt inspectors. Um, and let's not even talk about an individual landlord. Let's talk about an apartment complex. And I'm being specific to Texas, really. But I've learned this pattern, I guess. There are many, many mold inspectors in the state of Texas, but I'm starting to know them by name and by their work. So these apartment management companies in Texas, they have preferred inspectors in different areas of Texas, let's say, or different areas of Houston or Austin or Dallas. Because those inspectors, their bread and butter is being hired by these property management companies that oversee these apartments, and they're making a killing. But now that means that they're doing something favorable to almost protect that property management company. Let's say a property management company for an apartment hires my company. I go in there and I'm finding all this mold. I document it properly. I take these samples. Do you think they would hire me again? No, never. So I would not have that revolving income from a property management company. They never call my company. I can say that, and I'm glad because it ends up being the tenants that call us, and we go in there and show the truth, the truth, basically.
Right. So in that context, it's because the landlord, if they were to use someone like you, it would just cost them more money. And so they get to take less money home, or the property owner gets to take less money home because in order to properly remediate the mold, it would cost them a lot more money to do the proper remediation for the tenants. And so it's not ideally you want it to cost less to run the building if you think of it from a business perspective. And what I'll add is we have our patients will call landlords to say, has there been water damage in this apartment because I'm sensitive to mold? And 90% of the people that call and ask that, they either never get a return call or they say, oh, we don't have any more inventory now. Because if you use the word mold sensitive, they will not or they do not want you to stay in their place.
You're 100% correct in all of that, meaning yes, if my inspection is more thorough than Joe Blow inspector down the road, yes, that means almost every time it's going to cost more to remediate
Right.
everywhere that I've found mold because it is a mold assessment consultant licensed in the state of Texas. We're not really allowed to, let's say, go into an apartment or a home and just assess one specific area, like let's say a kitchen sink. I have to assess the entire property because if we're doing remediation on a kitchen sink based cabinet and we might make it perfect, we get clearance, everything, but if there are other sources of mold in that same apartment or home, it's just going to recontaminate the environment. So really,
Right.
that's not even a band-aid. We're throwing all this money and really doing nothing with it. But most of the inspectors that are hired by these property management companies, they will do what is requested of them, even though they're not allowed to per the rules and regulations in the state of Texas. So it's less to use Joe Blow inspector, someone who will assess, let's say, an apartment more favorably for the property management company, and maybe even participate in the gaslighting or minimize how much comes back in a sample. A good way they can do that is, and I witness this all the time, Judy, where let's say I'm following for litigation, a lot of times once let's say, build a case, then we're going to say a property management company or even the builder might choose their own expert and they'll coordinate a time to go and inspect, let's say, this structure, let's say someone's house. So I'll show up with my body cam and I'll video their assessment, watch them closely, just like the doctor you referred to earlier at the beginning of this interview, without me saying his name. But I witness these inspectors, they'll see the visible mold, they'll photograph it from afar so it doesn't look big and scary. But then when I watch them take the swab, the sample, they'll swab right next to the mold. Talk about minimize what comes back, if anything comes back at all. And so if nothing comes back, then they'll say that must have been dust all of the time. It's corruption at its core, meaning, okay, in these situations where I'm videoing another inspector performing their duties to disprove the fact that I found all this mold and I have all of these photographs showing all of this mold. How, I mean, really, if we think about it logically, how can someone disprove photographic evidence? And so these corrupt inspectors will go in, whether again it's an apartment or a home, and they'll always stay at a distance from the area that they need to actually, performing the assessment on. I witnessed them turning off the flash on their camera. I mean, the flash on the camera really does very little. I use a very high-powered, focused beam of light that I'm holding just to illuminate what I'm going to be photographing. They'll stand, and I'm close. They'll stand far away, turn off the flash, and not use a flashlight because they want to minimize everything. It goes back down to the corruption in this industry. It's endless. I say this a lot. 99% of this industry, the mold industry in the state of Texas, is corrupt, and many, many of the products that are out there to assist people with mold, it's snake oil. It's these companies are taking advantage of our fears and our emotions. And these inspectors out there are also doing the same, where I might do one assessment per day, one, because I'm there all day. And then I'm having long sit-down discussions with my clients to explain all of it. The other inspectors, they love running out there, taking a few air quality samples, done. They're off to the next one. They'll knock out 2 or 3 in a day. So yeah, we look for those people, those corrupt inspectors. We look for them. It's kind of fun. We'll get them.
I can totally relate in the wellness space, but I won't go deep into that. In terms of the families, what have you seen in some of these cases in terms of the illness of the family? So when you find mold or when these cases, there is water damage that has become mold, what has happened to the families and their possible chronic illness?
Oh my goodness. So and I can answer this because I have conversations with these families. I interview them. I meet people that are blind. They have cataracts. I meet people that are paralyzed. Sometimes it could be just their hand or their arms.
Right.
They can be paralyzed from the waist down. I've also seen those people that can't walk again
Yeah.
after getting out of the house. But arthritis, osteoporosis, MS, Parkinson's, cancer, hair falling out in clumps, uh, hormone dysregulation, vitamin and nutrient deficiencies, bleeding out of the ears, out of the nose, autism runs rampant too right now.
Right.
I've seen everything under the sun really, and I know you have probably experienced it more than me, but just without looking at the research that is out there, and I'll say this, the science is out there regarding mold and the adverse health effects associated with it. But even if I don't look at that peer-reviewed literature, after being in this industry for 9 years, it's obvious that mold causes adverse health reactions in many people, whether they're sensitive or not. If they're not sensitive, well, when do they become sensitized? It's, everyone has their breaking point.
Yeah, we have seen a lot of indoor environmental professionals or, the mold inspectors. And so maybe this is a cautionary tale for you too, but we see that eventually they become unwell and it doesn't matter how healthy they are. It's just after 20 years, they develop something. And it's just maybe no one is safe, right? We think of certain people are more susceptible, and I think maybe they're just sicker quicker. And that could be the sign of, hey, this home is not safe. But I think eventually everyone gets sick in a water damaged building.
I agree completely with that. I have Olympic athletes as clients.
Okay.
They can't play anymore. They can't play the sport. I see people that are a million times healthier than me, and they can barely get out of bed. They can barely even answer the door when I knock on it to meet them for the first time. But yes, my wife, Emily, and I talk about it often. You know, how long can I keep doing this job? My exposure sometimes is especially in these military homes that we talked about briefly, my exposure is substantial at times, and it'll knock me down. Um, Staying safe is very challenging to do in all of these homes. Uh, but and I get that question asked a lot. Well, how can you do this, Josh? And I
Yeah.
tell them very simply, I don't live here.
Mm.
I go back to a safe home. My home is my sanctuary. My family is not being affected by mold in this home that we're living in. Uh, so I can handle these bursts of exposure as long as I'm going back to a healthy home.
Okay, that makes sense. In terms of the inspections, do they catch other things other than mold? So, VOCs, I know that can also be impacted because of water damage, but, even radon exposure, any other toxins that a standard home inspection does? Hey guys, just a really quick break. Nutrition with Judy's private practice is now called Empower Functional Health. I started as a nutritional therapist, but we have become much more all-encompassing. At Empower Functional Health, we do functional medicine, chronic illness, autoimmune, gut health, environmental illness such as CIRS, mold illness, Lyme. Regardless of all these names, the goal for us is always to get you root cause healing answers. And of course, carnivore, the all meat elimination diet is always on the table. Food, the right food, is always medicine. We offer functional tests, prescription meds, and really everything to get you closer to root cause, where you can just eat the meats you enjoy and live the life that you are meant to symptom-free. The goal is to get off meds, supplements, and everything else that your body no longer needs support in. Our practice, whether it's Nutrition with Judy, sharing podcasts and free content, or our private practice, Empower Functional Health, our goal is to support you guys in the barbell theory. We give a lot of free content, our evidence-based research. We don't use Substack. We give all our stuff away for free. We interview with the best and make it super tactical so you have clinical pearls that you can walk away with and try in your own healing journey. And then we work with some people in a smaller subset, one-on-one, to provide that level of personalized care. And as we heal these people that are chronically ill, we find these clinical pearls and golden nuggets that we can share then more publicly so that we can make wellness for all. Hopefully, the content and the guides and the free stuff we give out is enough for you to heal. But if it's not, you can always come and work with us in our private practice so that you can get more personalized care. If you want to learn more, make sure to check out empowerfunctionalhealth.com.
So it just depends on, let's say, the inspector, like me. I choose not to test for radon, which is simple to do. It's just a radon meter. I mean, they even have inspectors out there that, measure EMFs. There are many different tools of the trade where, yes, I could expand what, let's say, my company offers to each and everyone, but I don't want to be good at everything. I want to be great at something. And so I choose to be great at finding mold and determining what the source of water is, which facilitated that mold growth. But now, when we say, let's say, a regular inspection, a lot of times when people say that, they're really talking about a home inspector. And really, I don't know what they're good for. Sorry if you're friends with one or any of y'all know a home inspector, but most people looking to buy a home don't really care that much about a simple faucet. Yeah, they want the faucets to work, or they want to make home inspectors that make sure the toilet is so far away from, let's say, a vanity. Now, they do some good things like making sure the home is grounded so lightning doesn't strike it. And they check the functionality of an oven, but also that's something we can do. And I get this often. A lot of people say to me, Josh, well, how did you find all this? And my home inspector found nothing. Well, it goes back to the primary source of referral. So a lot of people that buy homes, and this applies in many, many states, almost every state, they have a real estate agent. Their real estate agent typically has maybe a short list, but they do have a list where they make very specific recommendations. Oh, here's a great home inspector. We use them on every home. So they trust their agent. Sometimes that agent that made the recommendation, sometimes it's family. But there's a conflict of interest already.
Right.
That guy, that home inspector, their bread and butter is referrals from insurance agents. I mean, from real estate agencies. That without that referral, that revolving referral door, they might not ever get business. So they're not going to go in there and kill the deal. Me, if someone hires me to do a pre-purchase assessment inspection, I'm doing my best to kill the deal. Because if I do my best to kill the deal, meaning find so much mold and I find nothing, that's a safe home. That's a darn good home.
So when people are purchasing homes and maybe even renting an apartment, do you recommend getting an assessor other than a home inspector? Because a lot of times as practitioners, we just recommend, why don't you go in the building, stay in there for 30 minutes? How do you feel? Or even get one of those ERMIs and do a Swiffer test. And if it comes out pretty clean, then maybe it's safe for you to stay in.
So it gets very tricky. And I love the Army. I do. I love the accuracy of the results. There's a lot of information online where even the EPA, who helped design that whole test, they denounced the use of it by the general public. So when they denounce it, the credibility of it, what they're really trying to say is don't really focus on the metrics itself, meaning all the computations that occur to give you an overall Army score. Let's say you have an overall Army score of a 3. Well, how did they come up with that number? That's where there is a flaw in the Army.
Fair.
And if you want, we can definitely get into that. But when you obtain, a surface collection from, let's say, an apartment you're looking to purchase, you're essentially collecting dust. You send it off to the lab. That's PCR analysis, polymerase chain reaction. That breaks that sample down to the DNA level. That is very accurate, quantitatively and qualitatively, meaning it assigns the species and the quantity. So I love ERMIs, but now you're going to find yourself doing a lot of ERMIs because there are going to be a lot of places that are not safe. And it's really, that's where you have to trust the analysis of the sample you provide. But, let's talk about, because yes, there are many canaries out there where they can walk into a home and within seconds, they know if it's right or wrong. I would say those people have a gift and a curse at the same time. They do. There's no ignorance is bliss for them. And so good luck for them to find a safe place. But now many situations, the weather outside on the day, let's say that canary is walking into an apartment to see if it's suitable for him or her. If the weather, let's say it's very calm, no wind whatsoever, it's a bright, sunny day, but no wind, then a canary can even walk into that apartment. And really, the canary's ability to determine whether that apartment is suitable or not, it decreases if the weather is very calm outside. If the weather is very windy, that's going to influence the structure in which the apartment is located. It's kind of like stirring it up, basically.
Sure.
You walk into an environment that is static, it's calm, no one's lived there in a few months, the AC system is barely cycling on, let's say once a day, twice a day, then it's not an accurate representation of living conditions and really what that environment can do for you. So while I like the Army and I love the canaries out there, but also it's like a double-edged sword. There are good days and bad days. And I know this as far as, let's say, a pre-rental inspection, I don't think apartment complexes allow that really. In fact, many different situations come up where, okay, if I'm looking to go to get an apartment in this one beautiful complex, they're going to take me to an apartment that is designated to be shown. It's it's staged with furniture and all this, and it looks great. They maintain it, they upkeep it perfectly, but that's not the apartment I'm getting. Once you sign the lease and everything, you're getting, 121B down the hall or in another building. You're not getting the apartment that you're looking at. And so that's where it becomes a death trap, especially if the place is flooded before, like in Houston. Be careful.
So what do you do if you don't have a ton of funds? And so maybe we can scrounge enough money to get the remediation or the assessment. But then if there's a lot to remediate, I mean, what do people do in this perplexed situation when you know you're not well? It probably is part of the environment, but we don't have a ton of money to do actual remediation.
That's a very good question that you're bringing up because sometimes when I'm walking up just to the front door about to perform an assessment, I'm met by, let's say, a husband, and he walks outside before he even walk in the house and let's say meet the wife. Very rarely is it the opposite way around.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you know what I'm talking about. But he'll try to tell me, look, Josh, I know there's no mold here. I know that you're very thorough. He's trying to just kind of push me down a road that he wants me to fulfill for him because this is what he's been preaching, let's say, to his wife. Those are very awkward situations because I'm just like, sure, yeah. And at the very end of my assessment, I just hit him like with a ton of bricks because I can never ever minimize what I find. So, that's just one example of what I run into. But a lot of times people are very nervous because you're right. Maybe they can only afford the inspection itself. And based on what I find, they're hoping I find maybe something isolated. And that's what I pray for everyone. But that's rarely the case. I think in the past, over 3,000 assessments that I performed, and that's across the nation, I think I found two or three homes that were good, almost mold-free. Good meaning not a huge issue, but also keep in mind, people don't call me unless
Right.
they think or they know they have a mold problem and they need to determine the extent of it. I never get calls from clients where, let's say, the builder built their home properly and they're not really having any issues with mold. They would never call me. But that's where it comes down to the inspector that any individual is hiring. Meaning, okay, if I perform this assessment and I find all of these different issues with the home, then a lot of times my clients will be like a deer in headlights. They just freeze. It's like, where do we go from here? Well, that's where it's the duty of the inspector to provide adequate counsel, meaning we have to prioritize things for them. But even by prioritizing the different steps of this mold remediation project, there are times where they can't afford any of it. So that's where, as the professional they hired, then I have to start talking to them about mold management as opposed to mold remediation, which is the removal of the mold. Managing the mold is understanding how and why and where mold grows, but more importantly, understanding now where's the mold in your home? Why has it grown there? Now, how do we prevent that mold from interacting with us? How do we manage where it goes? And that gives, by doing that, and there's so many different ways we could talk about mold management, but by doing that, that gives my clients, for one, peace of mind. It doesn't mean run from the home. I have many conversations with many clients where I'm asking people to walk out of their house right now. It's this bad. But just because I find mold doesn't always mean that remediation has to take place. Because if they can't afford it, then now we have to have a different solution. The different solution is manage it so that it buys my clients time to save for it. And also just to decompress from being told here, 5 different areas of your house require remediation. That's shocking. They need time to sometimes digest it and look at different options and alternatives.
Do you find a lot of homes where you have to say you really need to get out of this home? It's pretty bad.
Yes. And many of these situations where, let's say a builder's getting, like I'm building a case for a client or for an attorney, um, I mean, I find the worst of the worst in certain situations like that, where I'll cite the home as unfit for occupancy very quickly. And so a lot of times it's not because, I mean, I'll cite a home as unfit for occupancy without even taking a sample. For instance, and I would say a great example of a situation like that would be when I find mold inside of an HVAC system and it's just carpet-like coverage inside of the supply plenum, which is internal. And so whether, let's say, you have the AC on or the heater on, that air that your HVAC is producing passes into the supply plenum. And then from that area, that's where all the ducts attach to your system. And all those ducts run to the different rooms and areas of the home. So if I find there's a carpet-like growth inside of that supply plenum, that means all the air being circulated by the lungs of the home is highly contaminated. And therefore, yeah, the home is unfit for occupancy, whether I sample it or not.
Do you find that the HVAC units are often contaminated? I mean, if you were to give a percentage,
I would say easily over half of the time, I'll find that the HVAC is the main culprit.
okay.
And yes, there might be other less intense underlying issues with mold, like small amount of mold beneath the sink, things like that. But it goes back to the HVAC, the lungs of the home. When that is contaminated, everyone is being affected. Every room in the house is being affected. So I would say easily over 50% of the time, it's the HVAC. But I could talk about HVACs, the design and the deficiencies of their installation too. Just the other day, I performed an assessment for beautiful young family, beautiful home too, 2 stories. I think it was around 4,500 square feet. Beautiful. I found mold, but I didn't find that to be their problem. I wasn't playing doctor. I found that their HVAC was installed in a manner in a closet that was evacuating all of the air from the walls of the home and the subflooring in between floors 1 and 2. That HVAC was sucking the air out of there. And that meant the HVAC was also withdrawing air from the hot, humid attic directly into the system. And so I started noticing around the home, using my flashlight, from an angle, I would illuminate just unquantifiable amounts of dust, but also ultra fine particulates of blown in fiberglass insulation, meaning my clients predominantly were being exposed to just insane amounts of fiberglass insulation, which were causing upper respiratory issues for them, asthma. I didn't find it was mold in that house, but I mean, that's diagnosing a home down to its function from a building sciences standpoint. And again, I think that's what all inspectors should be doing. We're taught to do that. But just because I do mold doesn't mean it's always mold. And I'm open to that. I'm open to the challenge of it not being mold, and then if it's not mold, what is it? And so that was a great example of when it's not mold, I guess.
What about people that then use air purifiers? So I have one right behind me, but if the HVAC system is blowing not so great air, and let's say I put two or three in this room, does it really help?
Okay, we'll talk about, and I get this a lot too, Judy. So if we talk about a home where the HVAC has that carpet-like growth inside of the supply plenum itself, and that means all the air that's being circulated throughout the home is highly contaminated, then those three HEPA air purifiers right behind you will do nothing. Let me say it this way. They're doing something, but they're not doing what you think they're doing, how that product is marketed to you. So, and I'm not going to talk about any specific name brand. There are some really, really good HEPA air purifiers out there. And I hate to say it this. Okay, so breathing in mold, I think we can agree is bad. Inhalation. But now, inhalation of mold is not our largest route of exposure. Dermal is. Mold can pass through our skin. And when I say mold, specifically, I'm really targeting the mycotoxins, which have also been proven to pass through the blood-brain barrier. Now, and again, forgive this example, but I can't think of a better one. If I were to make my own air filter out of skin, would air flow through it? The answer is no. Air won't flow through our skin. So if I made that air filter out of skin, mycotoxins can still pass through it. So if we consider the HEPA air filters behind you or any HEPA air filter, air freely flows through that filter. While it might be doing something, especially let's say with mold spores and such, when it comes to the mycotoxin, good luck. So I meet people that have 10 of these HEPA air purifiers. They still can't live in their home, especially when it's the lungs of the home. So I encourage everyone, not necessarily call me to inspect your HVAC, inspect your HVAC any way possible. Call your HVAC contractor and demand that they give you access to the inside of your plenum and don't take their word for it. Don't ask them to, look and tell me if you see something. You want to be up there with them. Let them cut an access hole for you and patch it back up, or let them remove a duct from that plenum so that you can look inside and take photographs. And I encourage everyone to do that because I've been in situations, Judy, where I'm the fourth inspector. There were three before me. And let's say it's over the span of a couple of years. They're just battling every, let's say, chronic illness there is, and no doctor can figure it out, and no one's finding mold in their home. Thank God they're still trying to find out if there's mold in their home. And I'm very grateful that they finally call me. And I find their AC system is just full of mold. It blows my mind. Most inspectors don't look there. They don't want to look there. And they could have saved so much money and so much time, trips back and forth to the doctor, if they would have just had someone or them themselves checked inside their HVAC. I see it all the time.
Yeah, we see some patients get an air purifier and make a safe home or a safe room and they'll feel a little better. But then there's some people that get the air purifier and it doesn't do anything. So I think some of what you just highlighted makes sense. If you had three things that you wanted homeowners to consider before buying a home or renting, are there any three things that you would recommend?
Sure. First thing that comes to mind, stay away from stucco homes. Stucco in many different states, but also Texas specifically. I have found one stucco home done correctly. One.
Aren't most homes in California built with stucco?
Many of them are, and
Okay, guys.
I go to California often.
Okay.
Never is it done properly.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, but let's think about who's building the home, whether it's stucco, brick, or limestone. We're choosing a builder, let's say based on the reputation, based on how long they've been in the business, based on all these different awards and their pretty marketing package that they're putting out on TV for everyone to see and buy their homes. And so we pay excessively high amounts of money for this special builder to build my special home. That's not who's building the home. The people building our homes, we wouldn't give them $1 to build our homes if we knew they were building it and they didn't know building code, or they couldn't read or understand the building code, or they weren't highly trained in the specific area that they're functioning during the construction of my house. That's why stucco homes are all bad. There was one structure. It was a clinic in Chihuahua, Mexico. It was all stucco. It was done properly. Everywhere else, it's not done properly. And so stay away from stucco. And actually, I think I should dive a little deeper on the stucco to say why. But good luck finding a properly stuccoed home. So I'll also group into this discussion about stucco, I'll group in brick and limestone. So whether it's stucco, brick, or limestone, that masonry cladding on the outside of our house, those are all passive wall systems. So what I mean by that is, let's say the wind is driving the rain into your stucco wall or your brick or your limestone. Within a minute, sometimes a minute or two, that liquid rain passes through the mortar of brick, mortar of limestone. It passes through the stucco. They're passive wall systems. There has to be built-in drainage planes. So with stucco, there's supposed to be gap, an air gap behind the stucco itself, so that once that rain gets through, gravity pulls it down where it can weep out from beneath the stucco, which would require, let's say, a weep screed, a specific type of flashing at the very bottom of that stucco. With limestone and brick, there has to be, and this is all per code, weep holes every 24 to 36 inches at the base of a brick wall, so that once that liquid water penetrates, rolls down the backside, you should see it weeping out the weep holes. So I would say the overwhelming majority of the time with limestone and brick, and this applies to new builds or 20, 30-year-old homes. At a distance, let's say the brick home, it appears to have weep holes, but I don't trust any home that I walk into. So what I do is I approach the outside of the brick wall. I'll get down on my hands and knees. I'll use my flashlight and shine it into the weep hole, and I'll see that really it's an impression or indentation. It stops, let's say an inch into the mortar, meaning it doesn't go through and through to the back vented cavity behind the brick. So it's a non-functional weep hole, or it's fraudulent, meaning someone tried to make it look like a weep hole almost to deceive, but that brick wall will not drain efficiently. It's prolonged retention of liquid water, which means that the environment behind the brick cladding of this home I'm discussing possesses the environmental conditions that are conducive for mold to grow. There are situations where I do remove brick. Usually that's when we're in litigation. We invite the builders, inspectors to be present on site and participate, so that we're not just opening up their brick walls on different days. And yes, I'll find mold, of course.
Is it difficult to create a properly functioning weep hole? Why does that happen?
It's not difficult at all. It happens because the bricklayer doesn't know that it's necessary. Let's say a good example of that would be this. The bricklayer builds this entire wall system. Start down low, they go all the way up to the eave of the home, let's say. After the bricklayer does his work, they try to get paid. They, submit that invoice to the builder, and the builder, maybe the superintendent, foreman for the builder, goes out and do a quick inspection. Well, if that bricklayer did not install weep holes, then he's going to be notified. And countless times I've seen where the bricklayer just takes a drill bit and a drill and attempts to drill in the holes after the fact. And sometimes I'll see where the drill bit goes through, let's say, the corner of the brick. That means they're drilling it after the fact, or they'll only drill, let's say, a quarter of an inch in, and it's a perfectly round, channel. So I know it's a drill bit. So it comes down to, well, ignorance of what the code requires, but also there are not checks and balances. If I'm a builder and I'm going to put my name on a house, yeah, I can't build the whole house myself. So I'm going to have contractors assisting, of course, but I have to check them every step of the way. You can't check the bricklayer after he's finished with the wall. You check the bricklayer on day one when they're setting that first course of brick. That way we can stop and halt everything and say, no, we need to establish weep holes now. And it's like catching the ball before it hits the ground. And a lot of times it also comes down to maybe respecting, the subcontractors that are building the house, meaning they're treated like dogs. They're paid nothing. So when I build my house, my plan is I'm going to send a food truck by at least once a week. Everything's on me. I'm going to learn every subcontractor's name that has a hand in building my house. And I'll bring, let's say, examples. So let's say for the bricklayer, I'll bring an example of Hey, on day one, look, I'll show them. If we cannot communicate well, then I'm gonna show them a video. If we can communicate well, I'm going to ask them to be laser focused on weep holes and making sure we have proper drainage planes behind the brick. But I'm also going to bring cash. I know his name. Without me going to the builder, that's all I can do. If I go to the builder and I demand weep holes and they check my weep holes, they'll probably just cancel my contract. I see it happen often. Um, so I cut out the middleman, who I say is the builder, and I go to the subcontractor. But now ultimately, when you're buying a house, your contract is with the builder. So who is ultimately responsible? The builder is for construction defects.
Do you think it's safer to buy newer homes versus a home that's 150 years old, or is it equally as bad? What are your thoughts with that?
I'll start by saying that so many brand new homes, and when I say brand new, I'm talking something, day 1 to 3 years old. But a lot of us also think, a home that's 10 years old is still brand new. So here's a good example. There was a home just south of Houston. It was 18 months old. Beautiful home, probably 4, 5, 6,000 square feet. Now, everyone in the home is getting sick. No one could figure out what was wrong, but some mold was identified in a hallway upstairs. Quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
The builder was proposing, to those homeowners, because again, we're 18 months into the home. They're going to take care of any issues, hopefully, that arise. They were just going to cut out the drywall and move on. But I forgot what contractor told them they need to have a mold inspection performed, and they ended up getting in touch with my company. What was so shocking was every wall upstairs in this home, with the exception of the visible mold, let's say that was in the middle of a hallway, every other wall looked perfect. But any wall that I drilled into, I could just blindfold myself and just start punching holes in the wall. And I insert my borescope. The inside of all of the walls on the second floor was just, well, it had carpet-like coverage with mold inside of the walls. A year and a half old. So I think newer homes can be worse than the much older homes because, okay, drywall today is not what drywall used to be 30 years ago. Today, there are many more adhesives, bonding agents inside the paper that's on the backside of the drywall. Mold loves that. So if inside of a wall we have excessively high humidity, then paper is cellulose that's full of bonding agents and chemicals. Mold will proliferate on the backside of our drywall. And those are the most dangerous homes because we can't see the mold. It has the potential to kill them in that situation. And I run into that situation that I briefly described time after time after time. All the time I ran into it. A home looks perfect and it's far from it. It's because I would say that, and most mold inspectors should answer this way, meaning if you were to ask me, where do you normally find the mold? Okay, if it's not in the HVAC, where do you normally find it? My answer would be inside of a wall. A lot of inspectors should also agree with that. But why don't all inspectors look inside the wall, check inside the wall? What most inspectors like to do, and this is a red flag for anyone looking to have a mold inspection, is stay away from the inspectors that walk in and say, let's say to you, the homeowner that hired me, they walk and say, well, where do you want me to sample from? That's that's a huge red flag. Just be gone. That that's the job of any inspector is we have to assess the home, meaning diagnose the home. Once we find the mold, well, what's the root cause of that mold? Its ability to form right there. That's what we're supposed to specialize in. That's why people pay us as professionals. But so for an inspector to walk in and just want guidance from the homeowner, just kick them out of your house real quick. But also for, let's say, inspectors that just walk into a home, and so many inspectors out there, y'all, they rely on air quality sampling only from, let's say, from the middle of a room. Well, let's go back to the scenario I just talked about where the mold was inside of the wall. So if I'm finding mold inside this wall and I confirm it with a borescope, inspection camera. And why would I walk 10 feet away and take an air sample from the middle of the room to find out what the mold is inside the wall? Doesn't make sense. So I would say, obviously, in that situation, I'd perform a wall cavity sample, insert a tube into the wall, connect that to my biopump. And yes, I'm taking an air sample, but it's from a targeted and focused location from where I found the mold to be.
In terms of the testing, sometimes the IP or the mold inspector will come in and say, where have you ever had water damage in the home? And so then they will test those wall areas or the areas close to where the water damage was, because otherwise, well, our homes are all filled with walls. So then where do you start? Do you poke holes in all the walls? That's where it's confusing. And your thoughts?
So at the beginning of any inspection that I perform, I have a brief interview. I I want to know, what are they experiencing? Why did they even, set up this inspection to be performed? But I also want to know historical data about the home. I want to know if, the children clogged up the toilet by putting their toys down and it overflowed and y'all didn't catch it for 12 hours. I want to know, where did the water go? Um, I want to know if a tree came through the roof or they just had hail and so they had small leaks. Meaning any history about the home is very helpful. So yes, I'm going to check those locations too. It doesn't mean I'm just going to go sample from those locations only and not assess the remainder of the home. I can't let that narrow my duties. If they said they just had one toilet overflow and I go and check out that one toilet and let's say even the walls around the toilet and I see nothing, my job is done. No, I still have to go through the whole house. But sometimes those breadcrumbs help, yes. But let's say, Judy, you buy a home that's 30 years old, no disclosures whatsoever when you purchased it, meaning it's a perfect home, very rare, by the way. And 2 weeks into it, you're not feeling good and something's off. You got these malodors, and so you call me. Well, you don't even know the history of the home because nothing was disclosed. So that's where I have to be the investigator. I have to look for concealed water damage, painted over. I have to look for slight modifications in, let's say, in wood and trim around baseboards where a cut actually exists, but it should not be there, or the cut that was performed on this piece of baseboard does not reflect how the rest of the baseboards were cut, meaning it tells me that someone with little experience made this repair to these baseboards, let's say behind a toilet, but yet a pattern throughout the rest of the home shows me it was a professional who did all the baseboards before. So I look for changes in things like that, but also like texture on a wall. It's so hard to perfectly match texturing when we're just doing a patch, let's say. And so I'm looking for texture changes or even just changes in the tone of paint. And that allows me to go further into those areas because, again, my job is to not trust the home. And that's, I think, what everyone pays me to do is I walk into everyone's home that's beautiful, as any home should be for any family. But I have to pretend it's the devil, basically. And I've got to find out what it's trying to say, but it's hidden, meaning there are outward signs that a home has issues. So let's say I came visit you, Judy, and I didn't just get through running, I just walked slowly up to your office but I'm in a cold sweat when I show up to your office for no reason whatsoever. That's my body saying something is wrong. Well, I look at a home the exact same way. Yeah, I look for those texture changes or the changes in workmanship, but I'm also looking for a home that sweats. Now, seeing that with the eye can be very challenging. I do use specific ultraviolet lights to show me things the naked eye can't see. UV lights can be very helpful for even showing certain kinds of mold, not all of them. It will illuminate, but also be careful with UV lights for anyone who's listening. They can be scary. Interpreting what you're seeing under the blue light can be challenging, and you might think it's something bad when it's not. So just be careful with that. But most every home I go into, it's telling me a story because I'm looking at, let's say, your home, Judy, differently than you are because you lived there.
Right.
Everyone does that, and that's expected. That's human nature. Even with my personal home, I don't come home every day and re-inspect my home. That would just be too much. I'll probably do a quick once over every 6 months with my home, just to ensure that everything is still functioning properly and my family is still safe. But it's also easy for people to become their own inspector. That's what I had to do. That's why I even got into this industry. My family went through mold, and I mean, to a horrible degree, we did. We were renting a home at the time too, and it freaked us out. I mean, here we are, we were in our mid 30s. My wife had sold, high-end custom homes for many years. I had my own remodeling business, been in construction for many, many years. Just even growing up as a child, just around my father, working with his hands, knowing all this stuff. And we got blindsided by mold, really just like anyone does. It's kind of how we learn about it. It's trial by fire. And it's also unfortunate though, because it's like no one really, it's almost taboo. We can't believe it until it greatly affects us. So that's what happened to us. And that's when we also found out about the corruption in the industry, the requirements for licensure. Turns out all the contractors involved in our project were not licensed, and we were just getting gaslit and lied to. No one likes that. Once they find out they're being lied to, no one likes that. So that's what prompted us to know what we need to know. So I'm gonna get my license. Now I don't need to ask them questions. And when they say that my home is cleared, it's safe for reoccupancy. That's not up to my landlord. That's not up to the contractors. That's up to me as the husband and the father. So I went back into that house after they said it was clear and it was more contaminated than before. I mean, the amount of just visible mold growth that I saw was much greater than before because walls were opened. I could access different areas. And I also cared about my family's health. So I went through it with a fine-tooth comb after, becoming educated on it. And I'm not saying everyone needs to go get their license to be competent. It's just not being scared to open up a wall. Little openings, not, you don't have to cut out big sections of the wall because if you do find mold after doing that, then you've spread it also. So, less invasive procedures like drilling a small hole, inserting a snake inspection camera, borescope, they're not expensive, but I think everyone needs to really empower themselves to do the work themselves. And if they start finding things and it's getting above their head, as far as it seems to be something systemic, sure, I think that's when a professional needs to be brought in and someone who can take samples, but also you can take your own samples in your own home. You can't really use them in a courtroom setting, but not everyone looks to litigate, right?
Right. I also don't think people that are chronically ill should be doing this on their own because they can exacerbate their illness. We know people that have opened up walls and then really, really got sick, even worse than where they were. So I don't generally recommend that. But for the people that are listening and watching, is there anything that you'd love for them to know or a tip that maybe we haven't touched as they're going through this whole mold illness journey, especially with the environment, which is the fundamental thing that they really need to fix is living in a place that they could start healing?
Yes, and the second part, what you just said was, I would say, most important. So let's talk about running from mold for the rest of your life. I have clients that they've been in 7 or 8 different homes now. They're running from mold, and it's never-ending story for them. And most individuals, not all, they'll attribute it to cross-contamination. So if I live in a horrible home and I now buy a brand new home, surely it has no problem. And I got rid of so many things, but let's say I brought my late grandmother's favorite chair with me. I didn't even think about it. I brought that chair. I had to sentimental value. And now I find myself 6 months later not being able to live in my brand new home. And everyone in my family is going to look at that chair. That's not happening. That is not
Thank you.
what's causing mold to grow in the new home. So you never want to take contaminated materials with you to any home. So it comes down to the environment, Judy. You were saying it's the home really that is the main culprit. If the home is growing mold, then it's a sick home, sick building syndrome. I don't even put a label on it. I'm not trying to give it a name. It was built improperly is what's wrong with this brand new home. But also at the same time, good luck finding a home that's built properly. There's no magic answer for how to find a home that's built properly, but it's always the environment you're living in. It's not grandma's chair. It's not, small articles of clothing. While you want to have those cleaned, what I always recommend to everyone is take all those things that you must keep, put them in a climate controlled storage. That way you're not throwing them away, which is very traumatic on its own.
Yes.
You still have access to them, but start over in a brand new environment. Start over again. Keep your stuff just not with you. That's it. And then once, let's say you're in a healthy environment, your body's going to get stronger. Your immune system will become stronger to where the goal would be so that you're not always sensitive to mold. And then at that point, it could be years sometimes before that can happen. Then you can slowly incorporate those things that are in storage,
Right.
slowly address how to remediate those, and then slowly incorporate those into your lives again.
Yeah, because I don't think the goal should be sterilization. I really think it's if you can find a place that's cleaner than where you live now, and you can start healing and get on the right protocols and worry about whether you should throw away something or not later so that you don't have to have all of this traumatic stuff happening at the exact same time. And if you can start healing in a cleaner home, and then maybe as you heal, you can even move into another cleaner home and figure out all that. But the goal is just if you can get into a cleaner home, maybe it's a temporary tent, maybe it's a temporary place that you can go that's a bit safer so your body gets stronger so that you can then have the wherewithal to even make these decisions and then move forward from that. But I don't think the goal is, okay, I have to burn everything down and then move on. I mean, maybe just taking like if you have a sentimental blanket, a little blankie, and it's I don't think it's that one thing that's making you sick forever. So maybe you save it for later or you just take it and clean it and do the best you can with it. But if your next building is like you said a silk building, that will also make you sick and it's not the blanket that you brought. I truly feel that our bodies are a little bit more resilient than that. And so that's where I'm right there with you. I think it's not just the chair you brought that then contaminated the whole home. If it did, it's because the home was already sick and you're
Yes,
just causing fuel to the fire. So,
absolutely. Yes. And what we're talking about, we can kind of transition into, and I get this all the time. Well, Josh, mold is everywhere. So I'm going to talk about that a couple different ways. Meaning, let's say you throw away grandma's chair and you buy the exact same chair online. It's delivered to your front door wrapped in plastic. Before you open the plastic, there's mold in it. That's true. Now, it better not be growing on that new chair. I mean, send it back, but mold is everywhere. That is true. If you can go to the park, sit on the bench. When you place your hands on that bench at the park, you're being exposed. You're breathing in mold everywhere. But in these depositions I go through, I get this question from every one of the defendants' counsel. They try to get me to agree mold is everywhere, which I do, but I also have them specify. Are they talking about just mold spores that are floating around the entire world, which come in through, let's say, an open window or through my front door? Or are they talking about mold growth? Because self-originating mold growth, mold that has the ability to grow in our homes, that's never acceptable. Never. That means something is wrong with the home, or we did not handle a water event quickly or appropriately. But a healthy home will never have mold growing in it. Meaning I can take let's say a handful of mold, and pretend I have a perfectly built home, and I can go throw that handful of mold into that home. It should never grow. I would never do that, of course, but can't avoid mold.
sure.
We can avoid mold growth. And really, everyone has to take a deep dive into building sciences, learning how homes should be built. And it takes time. It's not a race. 9 years in this industry, I still learn from different homes that I enter, different scenarios, different circumstances. But it comes down to, I would say, how we are building our homes as opposed to what we're building with. Sure, there are better products
Sure.
that can be utilized. Sure. In fact, let's take that to an extreme. So countless times I've seen mold growing on glass. Now, some people might find that hard to believe because, well, glass is not a source of food. It's
Right.
it's non-porous, in fact. Um, well, let's go back a little bit further. What does it take for mold to grow? It takes food, oxygen, and water. I never said mold spores because mold spores are everywhere.
Right.
Food, oxygen, and water. Again, how does mold grow in glass? Well, anywhere dust can settle, it can settle on glass. If it couldn't, we would never have to clean our windows, right? So anywhere dust can settle, dust itself is a source of food
Right.
for mold. Dust also has, mold in it. So oxygen will be there by default, so a source of water. If it's growing on the inside of our windows, it could be because of condensation forming on that window. It can be just because of high humidity in that room. That's how mold can grow in glass. So here we go into the extreme. Let's say I build a glass house. All my walls, I could see through all of them. Standing at the front of my house, I can see my backyard. If I built that home incorrectly, then I wouldn't be able to see through any wall within the first month. This mold will grow inside of all those walls. Well, how would it do that? I think most of us have witnessed, whether it's in our house or someone else's house, a double pane window that fogs up on the inside. So that's because the seal of that window broke. And when that happens, the inert gas, like argon, escapes. And it's not like there's going to be no more air left inside that double pane window when the inert gas escapes. Outside air will then backflow into that double pane window. A lot of times condensation will form in between the panes. And let's say by midday it's gone. That's for windows that get a lot of sun exposure. Let's say a window happens on the other side of the house, the sill breaks. That condensation will dwell, it will stay inside of that double pane window for just days or weeks on end. So they become visibly cloudy. That's mold growing inside of a window pane when the seal breaks. So that's infiltration of air. The seal broke, argon gas escaped, outside hot, humid, or just humid air entered that double pane window. So if I build a glass house and I build it wrong by not keeping the outside air out, then that outside air will flow then through the walls of my home, the glass walls, and mold will grow. So while there are better products out there than builders use as a standard, you want a mold-free home, the house has to be built properly. It's how we're building, it's not what we're building with. And so if outside air is entering the walls of our home, then the chances of you having mold increase exponentially. It's called infiltration. Um, do we have time for me to jump into that?
Yeah, let me ask you a question really quick. So, one of the reasons why I've been hearing that mold is worse nowadays is because we are making our homes airtight. So, we're trying to do the energy saving. And so now the homes can't really breathe as much. And that's partially why, if there's toxic air in the home, then it just stays. So, but by what you're saying, it sounds like getting air from the outside in is a form of infiltration. And so that's not ideal as well. So, what were you going to say about infiltration?
So, and going back to, and you're so right. Builders say it, homeowners say it, we're building our homes too tight. Sorry to be so direct. That is 100% false.
Oh,
So let's take a spray foamed home. Gosh, so many things can go wrong with spray foam. Just like anything, meaning pros and cons to everything. But I go into a spray foamed home where the entire attic is spray foam, so it's non-vented. Outside air should not enter that attic.
sure.
And the exterior walls of the home are also spray foamed. I'll go into those homes and I'll be able to prove that outside air is flowing through those walls, regardless of the spray foam, meaning it's either misapplied or they missed a spot or many spots. And so you take an ice chest like this spray foam home and you allow outside humid air to enter it, that home is just going to hold on to that humidity from the air, water vapor, and it becomes a petri dish. But so when it comes to homes being tight, either they have to be airtight or like 100 years ago, not tight at all. All the windows and doors open all day, every day, there's no AC. But now take that 100-year-old home and let's retrofit it. Let's bring it up to current Energy Star standards, we're putting double pane windows in a 100-year-old home. Same with the doors. We're trying to transform this home that was designed to breathe constantly. We're trying to
Okay.
make it breathe very little, and it becomes detrimental as it relates to mold. There are ways to do it, yes. It's just a delicate process. And many of these contractors and builders that are modifying these old homes are just they're creating these death traps, these petri dishes for the homeowners, unbeknownst to them. But so again, going back to our homes that are too tight, no, they're not. It's the opposite.
Okay.
Even though they're trying to make them as tight as possible, they're falling short. So the largest construction defect that I have found in my experience that leads to mold growth inside of our homes, it's called, and this is a building science term, infiltration. And I always follow that up with, well, infiltration of what? Infiltration of outside air. So if outside air is, flowing through a window or flowing through the crack of a window, that's no big deal. That's fresh air. If it's flowing underneath my front door or back door or the side of it, that's also no big deal. It's fresh air. The problem lies when that outside air is flowing through the wall.
Okay.
Because inside of the wall, we have materials that will absorb the water vapor, the humidity from that air, like wood, like drywall. It's absorbing that water. And now there comes a point where, well, how much water can that drywall or those wooden studs, how much can it hold? And it just keeps absorbing until it has enough moisture content to grow mold. That goes back to that 18-month-old home where every wall upstairs was just covered like carpeting inside of the walls. That was all due to infiltration. The builder on that home did not install what's called a continuous air barrier. That's chapter 11 of the current and many, many preceding versions of the International Residential Code, where it talks about the building envelope. And in that code, in parentheses, it says mandatory. There are no exceptions. The builder is to install a continuous air barrier. And what is that? Well, its job is to stop air, and it can't have a break or a cut or, oh, I missed a spot. It can't have that. Because if it does, then it's not a continuous air barrier. Air does get through, and that's where infiltration wreaks havoc on a home. And it's using the wall cavities of our home where we cannot see inside of them. So let's think of mid-August here in Austin, let's say, 100 plus degrees. Even though, let's say, Austin is much drier than Houston, still we average approximately 60% humidity.
Right.
So let's say one day it rains a bit. Let's say we're at 90, 100% humidity and it's well over 100 degrees. And that air is flowing through the walls of our home. Well, in the middle of August, we're going to cool our home. So when, let's say I have my thermostat set to, we'll call it 72 degrees, 75, doesn't matter. That means that all the surfaces in my home are being cooled to the 72, 70, 5-degree point. So again, they're cool. The drywall in my home is cool. So simultaneously, if I have hot, humid air flowing through that cool wall system, condensation forms on the backside of the drywall. It's called interstitial condensation. Just like if you were to walk outside in August with a cold glass of iced water, sweats. That's the same thing that happens with our homes when outside air is flowing into and through the walls of our home. It's that temperature differential that's allowing for dew point to be achieved. And again, it affects the whole home when it's happening, meaning I've seen liquid water forming at the bottom of a wall that didn't have any plumbing in it, had no window, no door. It was an interior wall. The only thing that was affecting that wall was outside air flowing into it. So infiltration is one of the biggest issues when it comes to construction, really by far. And it's the silent killer because the house might look beautiful, but mold is growing throughout the walls. So here's maybe what some of your viewers are thinking of. Well, and I get this all the time. It's in the wall. Can't hurt you if it's inside the wall, right, Josh? Oh, you know what? If it stays inside the wall, the truth is it can't hurt you. But wait, what caused that mold to grow inside the wall? That was infiltration of air.
Right.
So if air can flow into the wall, that means air must be able to flow out of the wall. Because if air could not flow out of that wall, then air would not enter the wall in the first place. So while infiltration of outside air is facilitating the mold growth inside your wall, it's also the infiltration of outside air, which is propelling the mold out from the wall. So through electrical outlets, through light switches, under baseboards, you name it. And it's shocking to see how much mold is in some of these homes. And the families don't even know it's there. That's what's scary. It's scary.
It is scary because so many walls can have that mold as you're talking about. We just had a client that did full remediation, small particle clean, and they missed a wall. And so there's another room that has to go through everything again. And it's hard because again, unless you have a mold assessor that is doing their job to that level that you're talking about, and it's hard because again, it's behind walls and we're all human, we're going to make some mistakes or we might miss something, but as we're closing, as homeowners that don't know this much about the building science, I just want to get better. Like, what are some steps that I could start taking, whether it's getting a mold assessor or getting even out of that specific place? What is something I can do, not knowing much about this, but just that I'm not feeling well?
That question, while it's good, I would say for me, it's extremely broad to where I don't know how to answer it just because every home is different.
Right.
And if it's just one wall in a home, then there are things that can be done, performed to that wall. Let's say the individual can't remediate this one wall, but that's the only place in the house where there's mold, which by the way, I would find that hard to believe, but there are things that can be performed to that wall to just make sure that the mold inside of it can't come out. So here's a good example. And I don't want to say too little when I'm describing this process. Saying too much would take hours. So if there's a wall with mold in it, and that's the only place that has mold, again, the only way that mold can harm anyone is if it gets out of that wall. So there are things that can be done to that wall, such as the baseboards. If let's say you have wooden flooring like you do, the baseboards, make sure you have, caulked seams, whether it's around the quarter round molding or above and below the baseboard. Make sure you're sealed airtight, let's say to the wooden floor. But now if you have carpeting in that room, then you would have to pull the carpeting back and you would have to seal beneath and above that baseboard because in carpeted rooms, there should be a pretty good gap beneath the baseboard because most carpeting is tucked beneath the baseboard.
Right.
So you'd have to pull the carpeting back and air seal that baseboard. Then electrical outlets and light switches. So if we think of a light switch, a wire runs to that light switch from the attic. So that means the wire is running straight down and it runs into the electrical box itself that the switch is installed into. So that means air from the wall can go in through the same hole that the wire is going through. So that's where a lot of that air escapes from. So they make I think I call them foam inserts for electrical outlets or light switches. They're just foam gaskets that you can put behind the plate cover itself. You can find them at the big box retail home improvement stores, even online. Some manufacturers refer to them as draft stops, like wind stops. But I always tell everyone, double it up. Put two inserts, let's say behind each light switch, two behind each electrical outlet, because it makes it very thick so that when you're tightening down on that plate cover, it's compressing those foam inserts. And then when it comes to electrical outlets, one additional step, they make these, the safety plugs for children not to electrocute themselves. Get the ones that have three prongs. And so after you put doubled up inserts behind, let's say, the plate cover of an electrical outlet, then put those baby safety devices into both receptacles there. And by doing so, you're stopping probably, 90 plus 95% of air that can escape from that wall. So that allows you to slow down what's happening. That's managing the mold. Um, but typically if you have, it just depends on the source of water. If you know you have mold beneath a sink, well, we have to consider like a vanity sink in a bathroom. We have to think to ourselves, well, how can that mold come out? You have the plumbing inside of that sink-based cabinet that penetrates the wall behind it. If you can't afford to remediate that cabinet right away, after you stop the source of water, then you have to air seal where the plumbing penetrates that wall from inside of the cabinet so that no air can exit that wall. But also you have to air seal that cabinet because if there's mold growing beneath it, you don't want it to be able to escape.
Right.
So you'd have to seal up all around that cabinet. So there are many different ways and many methods to air seal a home. But it comes down to what is the source of water? If it was just a simple pipe leak, then yeah, you can manage it. But if it's infiltration of air, it's typically not just one wall because the framework of a home is all interconnected. It's like a hidden highway. So if infiltration is occurring, it typically is systemic throughout the home.
Where do you think people should start? Just from listening to this conversation, what do you think people should do if they're not feeling well and they've been diagnosed with some level of mold illness from their practitioner?
Again, I like the ERMI. So if I go to a client's home and they already have an ERMI,
Okay.
I don't need to see it necessarily. They probably called me because it's not good. But my assessment of that home should be able to clarify what that ERMI is showing them. And I should be able to make, if I look at the ERMI that they performed after my assessment, I should be able to, again, align the home with the results that they obtained, meaning I don't even have to sample the home because I'm going to find the mold. Now, in a litigation type situation, sampling is almost imperative, but a lot of times I don't even have to sample a home. So ERMI, I think, is a great start, but then do what it takes to get inside of your supply plenum. Plenum is Plenum, supply plenum of your HVAC. So many people would not even have to hire me if they had their own HVAC company come out, give them access to the inside of their supply plenum, and they could see it for themselves. They don't even need me to go do that for them. So I think that would be a great thing. But now here's where it gets tricky. Let's say they find complete coverage inside of this supply plenum of mold. Well, how do you take care of that safely, correctly? Meaning, if just a random HVAC company comes in to remove that plenum that's full of mold, that's like kicking a hornet's nest that's the size of a school bus. That mold goes everywhere.
Right.
So there's safe ways to do that. Remediation, if some individuals can afford to remediate it, there are other ways that are very safe, even if it's DIY type remediation. If they want to do it themselves, meaning there are always should always be solutions. Maybe one is better than the other, but having that knowledge just before tearing out this moldy plenum, having the knowledge of, hey, what are we about to do? That's very important because, and I went through this with my wife, and a lot of men do this where, and sometimes it's vice versa. I'll acknowledge that, but most of the time it's the wife. She complains about the mold beneath the sink or something, and the guy just finally snaps and he just goes and tears it all up to get it out of sight, out of mind. What did what just happened then? They just spread the mold throughout the house. And you can't see it floating around, but it's going everywhere. And who knows what kind of mold was spreading throughout the house. So finding the mold in the HVAC is one thing. Depending on how much it is, you might have to be very, very careful though, on how it's taken care of. So I think a good starting place is a self-test with an ERMI. And then from there, you can go a little bit deeper if you want, checking inside your own HVAC. And if you've done all that and you found nothing, or maybe your ERMI showed something, but you found nothing in the HVAC and you can walk through your house, you're not seeing just widespread water damage and mold, then yes, hiring a professional would be recommended, of course. Just make sure you vet any inspector thoroughly. A lot of inspectors like to post online. Watch their videos, see what they're saying. And again, if they ask you where to sample, be gone. They're not the right inspector. But also a little bit of research, digging. self-education. But again, it could be something very, very difficult and challenging to find. So make sure you have a good inspector. It's not always call an inspector right away. Let them take air samples, and the air samples show nothing, which should be expected of an air sample. Rarely do they show elevations. So be very, very careful about that because let's say you have an inspector come in just to take air samples, but your doctor's labs basically are telling you you're being actively exposed to mold. And your ERMI that you did shows you're off the charts. But this guy walks in and takes air samples and they show nothing. I I've witnessed situations where, let's say, those homeowners believe the air samples, they stop thinking about mold. Now they start going down the rabbit hole of EMFs, bed bugs, radon gas, meaning there's a whole slew of things that can be attacking us. But they stop looking for mold because of these simple air tests. And that is, I believe, really one of the worst things that an inspector can do for any family out there is just rely on air quality samples. And then they never think about mold again because those air samples showed fine. That's the most expensive inspection there is because you're not going to find the source. You're going to continue to go back and forth to the doctor because you got bad information based off of bad sampling protocol. Sorry, I got off on a rant there,
No, I totally, I've seen that a lot actually in our practice.
but I mean, again, starting with you, that's what they need to do. Then go further with their own sampling. Again, the ERMI is very accurate. It's the analysis of it that is accurate. And then from there, it's more investigative, meaning have an AC guy come out, don't trust them, check it. Then from there, it just depends on really how bad the problem is, how sick you are. Do you hire a professional to look further? Kind of from there. And just be aware.
Okay.
Being aware is really half of the journey. It's the people that aren't aware of mold that are being affected by it. They have no reason to even look into it. But thanks to doctors like you, naturopath doctors out there that are aware of mold, then it's spreading like a wildfire. But again, being aware, that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
then
personally for me, I like to share this, even though I know it doesn't always, a lot of people don't care about building codes, but I think it's so important to share this information because if we have enough awareness, like the work that Christina Bear is doing, it'll allow for hopefully the building codes and the way that we're building homes to change. And it is required. I mean, I know it's kind of required now, but I mean, really change in a way that we're, as people, we should be able to buy a home and assume that it works properly, just like we buy a car and we assume it works properly. And yet we have to be the ones that also now have to question if the home is hurting us. And I mean, that's just not an ideal way to live. So I hope that as we share this information, that more and more buildings are changed so that we are not unnecessarily sick.
and that's what it comes down to. You said you used a very good almost analogy where, earlier we talked about sometimes how or why we buy a home. We're picking the best company, best reputation. They're large, so they probably have great insurance and they probably take care of their customers really well. But that's not who's building our home, it's the subs. So let's use that way to purchase a home, which is really socially conditioned into us. Let's apply that to the car industry. Let's say I'm going by a Cadillac, use a premium vehicle, but they don't have the one I want on the lot. So it's a custom order Cadillac. And I pay the dealer right there. I pay him, he orders my car, but the manufacturer, Cadillac, only sends the parts and pieces, and this dealership takes all those parts and pieces over down to your local AutoZone, O'Reilly's, to DIY type place and finds some people hanging out there and says, "Hey, y'all build this car for me. I'll pay you this much money. I'm not going to give you an instruction booklet on how to assemble all these pieces into this beautiful Cadillac." And they agree and they do that. Do you think any of us would get behind the wheel of that car if it wasn't scrutinized, and assembled at a manufacturer, but just some random people with no education on how to assemble that car are building that car? No one would get behind the wheel of that car. It would be a death trap. Well, same thing is happening when they build cars. Same thing. Heck, in Texas, you don't even have to have a license to be a builder.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's
No, all
just
of our
great.
builders are not licensed. California, you have to be licensed. Florida, you have to be licensed. Texas, we're special, and we're also known for, I think we rank number one for construction defects that lead to mold, Florida would be number two.
We did like a population study just of the people that work with us. Now we also cater to the carnivore community, so it's a subset of a subset that we deal with mold illness. And I'd say the top three places we get the most clientele is from Florida, Texas, and California. That's
Yes.
where a lot of the mold illness. Now, it could be that that's where a lot of the carnivore people are also watching the content, but we definitely see a lot of issues in those three states. And now we see it all over the US and even in international, but those are the biggest ones. I think Arizona is another one as well. And so it's ironic that people are like, oh, I'll just move to the driest states, but actually that's not really the answer either that we found. Florida is definitely a hard one. I
Yes.
will say that. But we also did a poll after that of our Florida clients and patients and asked how much are you healing since testing for CIRS, and I honestly thought the results would be pretty grim because environment is really tough, but over 50% said that they're healing. So it's I think this awareness is important. I know not everyone loves this information because it's a hard journey, but I think it could get people to root cause. I think it also can help us, as you said, we need to change the building codes. I always look at every single commercial building, and I know that they kind of slope their building, but if again they're using subcontractors, are they fully sloped? Well, but why are we making all buildings flat? And if this building or the roofs are flat, and if they're not sloping it correctly, then you're going to have puddles of water. And when we're on the highways, I could see the day after it rains that there's a pool of water, and I'm like, let me guess if there's going to be mold there. So it's we need a change, and I will keep advocating until we hear more and more people talk about it, so that we stop getting sick from the places we're supposed to call homes.
And that's it. No one wants to buy it. No one would pay a dollar for a home that is growing mold that's making them sick. No one would pay
Right?
a dollar for it. So yes, legislation needs to change. You're right, but awareness is spreading like a wildfire. It is. I'm not going to say that it's making a difference yet in how they're building homes, but something's got to change. It's going to come to a boiling point, and it's doctors like you, it's inspection companies like my company with my wife, and many other companies out there doing the same hard work. And it's just you can't put a TV commercial out there telling everyone about mold. It's almost home by home or case by case where we're dealing with it, and then it's everyone's job to learn from their experience and share it with everyone else.
Yeah. No. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you if they wanted to hire you as an inspector or even for the case litigation that you're talking about? Where can people find you?
Our company's name is Texas Mold Inspectors. Um, TexasMoldInspectors.com. We do have, I'm so bad with social media. We do have a Facebook account, and some other account. My wife does all that. I just find the mold. So go to TexasMoldInspectors.com, and you can find us on Google as well.
Okay. And I'll put that in the show notes. And so you work in the states of Texas and Florida?
Oh, I go to all the states.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
I'm licensed in Florida and Texas. Most like New York does require licensure, I believe,
Okay.
but
Gotcha.
most states really don't require licensure. Some will just require credentials, but I'm licensed in two states, but I operate in virtually every state.
Well, thank you so much for the work you do. It's honestly our next challenge as a practice is once we let people know they have SIRS or mold illness or that that's a culprit of why they're chronically ill and they want to remediate, there are some places in the US that we cannot find a good remediator, or not even a remediator, actually, a good inspector. And so the work you're doing, and if we could get other people on board to do the work that you're doing, then it'll become even more, accessible to people to start getting a proper assessment because your landlord, like you said, the real estate agents, they want you to buy, they want you to close. So they're not going to have the best inspector. So the work you're doing is so critical. So thank you for the work you're doing too.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored, and let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, we'll be in touch for sure.
Okay,
I'll
thank
talk to
you.
you soon. Thank you. Okay, guys, I hope that this conversation gave you a little bit more insight. It gave me a lot more insight about the building envelope. I always heard that from Dr. Shoemaker, and I wasn't fully sure what that really meant, but it makes a lot more clarity as to how our building or our homes need to be properly breathing. If you have mold illness and you are suffering from SIRS, maybe one of the first places to look is the HVAC unit and looking into the plenum that Joshua was mentioning. Here's the real talk. I know it is challenging to hear about CIRS, mold illness, how we have to take care of our homes and remediate. It's kind of not fair. We get the short end of the stick. We're sick from chronic illness. We realize our environment is affecting us. And then the environment, even knowing this information, it's not always easiest to find a place that is super clean. So what do we do? And I think the ultimate belief system I carry is that even if we are the early birds to this whole illness, we are the early adopters of knowing that mold and CIRS are real illnesses that are giving us chronic illness, autoimmune, and many other issues that we are being played with today. But if we can have enough momentum where the tipping point occurs, and then we start changing our building codes and the way we build, then we no longer have to make it such a hard illness and such an illness that too many people are suffering from without knowing about it. That is my hope in sharing this information. Yes, as early adopters, it is not easy, and I understand that. And my heart is with you all because I oftentimes hate that knowing that I have to tell my clients and patients, hey, your home is not safe, or you need to leave your home, or you need to remediate. And I don't even know if that home specifically is going to make you safer. But if we don't get the message out there, it will be generations to come that we will suffer unnecessarily from the building that should be the home that we are safe in. So I say take courage and know that we are part of this, hopefully, era that we can change and make this a tipping point where we no longer have to worry about the homes we live in. All right, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat, take care of your bodies and your homes because it is the only place you have to live in. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.